and welcome to Stirring the Pod podcast, a podcast all about discussing controversial food subjects, historical aspects of food, and pretty much everything else food and cooking related. Let me start by introducing my co-hosts. First up, we have Mr. Barbecue Brand, an aficionado of all things barbecue and a recently featured guest on Food Network's Barbecue USA. Welcome, Barbecue Brand.
Oh, well, thank you. Very nice to be here. It's your boy Barbecue Brand. What's cooking, everybody?
Next up, we have Mr. Brandon D., a connoisseur of Louisiana and Southern cuisine and a self-proclaimed food science nerd. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 12. We're excited to get this one going.
I am your host, KCP, a baking and cooking enthusiast and a lover of all Southern culture, history, and cuisine. Tonight's topic is a widely debated topic across Louisiana and the South. We will be discussing the differences between Cajun and Creole, from the history of the people to the cuisine we all know and love. All right, guys, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing well. I'm going to start this off controversially. I have to say this. The difference between Cajun and Creole, it's not tomatoes. Understand, everybody? Not tomatoes. I have to start off. I'm coming off the press hot.
Coming in
It's
hot.
like not tomatoes. That's not it. That's not the only thing that determines. So let's get this started.
So we're going to start off by talking about the history. So basically, there is this amazing book. If you guys don't know it, you should spend the money. It's like $80. But the Encyclopedia of Cajun and Creole Cuisine by Chef John Folse. If you guys can see this,
We can.
it's massive. It's $80, full color pages. It's a beautiful book, and literally in this book is the definition between the two of these two things. So these two cultures. If we're going to talk about the history of Cajuns, we got to start off with the Native Americans in Cajun culture and Creole culture because it all starts there. So I'm going to read some from this Encyclopedia of Cajun Creole because I think this is a very good documentation of the history of Louisiana. And I've read through this, not the whole book, obviously, but some parts of this. It's like my favorite thing to do on Sunday mornings with a cup of coffee is sit down with this book and just read through it and see all this stuff. You guys really have to get this book. So anyway, I'll read a little bit from it. So when Columbus sailed to America, Native Americans had been living in Louisiana for more than 3,500 years. Well, the general view is that Native Americans were primarily hunters and gatherers. Archaeological evidence suggests that a thriving trade economy existed in Louisiana at the same time as Ramses II was ruling Egypt. Moses was leading the Israelites from bondage, and the Phoenicians were trading along the Mediterranean. As yet, Rome had not been founded. Much of the evidence for this comes from a massive earthwork in northeastern Louisiana near present day known as Poverty Point. First reported in 1873 by Samuel Lockett, this prehistoric permanent village of sophisticated dwellers existed on a bluff overlooking swamplands of the Mississippi River. Y'all, when I read that, it blew my mind. So they had Native Americans in Louisiana at the same time as Ramses II was ruling Egypt. Like Moses, all that was going on at the same time. That doesn't even make sense to me. Like my brain totally bent thinking about that. Yeah. So our culture goes back that far.
That's old. It's very old.
At least that far. It's just unbelievable to me. Like history is so cool.
It is.
So that's where all of this starts. Living off of the land and farming and and just using the resources that you had on hand and what were available to you in that particular region. So that's where all of this starts. And that's what trickled down to the Creoles and then the Cajuns. So let's talk a little bit now about the Creoles. And this is where the controversy starts. So let's see. There is this other article that's really, really interesting online. The Historic New Orleans Collection Museum put out an article. What is the difference between Cajun and Creole, or is there one? So this is a really, really interesting article. So this goes back and says, what do we mean when we talk about Cajun country? The simple answer is that the term is synonymous with Acadiana, a 22 parish region settled in the mid-18th century by exiles, present-day Nova Scotia. About 3,000 Acadians arrived in South Louisiana from 1764 to around 1785. So more than 250 years later, their creolized name, Cajun, derived from the French Acadian, can be found anywhere. South Louisiana's reputation as Cajun country may seem as natural and inevitable as Spanish moss on a live oak tree, but it's actually a fairly recent phenomenon. The latest twist in a long story about Creole identity and the United States race relations. When photographers Douglas Baez and Charles Traub spent 6 months in South Louisiana in the mid-1970s, creating the work now on view in the new exhibition, The Cajun Document. The region was only just beginning to be known as Cajun country. So in the mid-70s, Cajun country was a thing. Like, this is fairly recent.
Yeah, think about how new that is. How new that term is.
It really is. So for 2 centuries, Creole had been the dominant term used to describe the region's people and culture. Cajuns existed, but prior to the 1960s, they did not self-identify as such in large numbers. For Cajuns were and are a subset of Louisiana Creoles.
Absolutely.
So today, common understanding holds that Cajuns are white and Creoles are black or mixed race. Creoles are from New Orleans, while Cajuns populate rural parts of South Louisiana. In fact, the two cultures are far more related historically, geographically, and genealogy. Not a lot more than people actually realize. And, growing up in South Louisiana, I didn't even know that. This was something I found out, I've known that, but to see this in here, people have researched this, this is really, really interesting.
Yeah, it really is interesting. The more that I read about it, the more that you start to realize that Cajuns really are a subset of Creoles, right? And it's more of area and access than it is at all about race or color or any of those things. So it's, those Cajuns, I actually read an article that said that Cajuns didn't self-identify until later, but it was the Creoles that were calling a lot of, some of our Southern Louisiana people Cajuns because they were a little poor and they weren't able to have access to food, and they used what they had on hand and what they could grow and what they had on the land.
Exactly.
So, think about that concept.
Right. So another section of this article, it said, for historians, identity evolution can be difficult to trace. The material record cannot replicate 200-year-old lived experiences and perspectives, but it does support the idea of an overarching Creolite, or Creoleness to which Acadian descendants belonged and self-identified through the 19th centuries. Much harder to substantiate is when those Acadian Creoles became calling themselves Cajun. It's a matter of scholarly debate, but the current consensus holds that the term existed by the end of the 19th century. However, its usage does not appear to have been widespread and range from neutral to pejorative, and it wasn't said with the kind of pride we see today. So basically, this had a lot to do with the one drop rule of racial purity underpinning segregation chipped away at the white Creole's comfort with the Creole label. With some white Creoles, they learned the word could be connected to blacks. They dropped the term. So there's where the racial divide began.
Right.
So, yeah. So just so we're clear, everyone is a Creole.
Right. I mean, because Creole is a pretty broad term. It doesn't mean somebody of mixed race. You can't be mixed race from another place and call yourself a Creole. You have to be from Louisiana. When you're talking Louisiana Creoles, which there are different Creoles, the term used in the Caribbean too. When you're talking about a Louisiana Creole, you have to be from here, and you usually have it's usually a cultural identification of somebody that's of French or Spanish descent and has a Catholic heritage. I mean, that's Catholic. That's typically what we understand as being a Creole.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And this is controversial. There are other definitions of it. You know, there are French Creoles, there are Spanish Creoles. I don't know if you consider German or English people Creoles, but if you're from Louisiana, I mean, you've been here long enough, you've adapted to the culture.
You have. We're just like a melting pot, basically.
It's a conglomerate culture. It really does take apart from everything, and every body's. That's why I love that book. It goes through the contributions of everyone: the English, the English, which you wouldn't expect, the Germans, the French, the Spanish, Italians, the Native Americans, the Italians, the Africans. Everybody built this culture, and
even the Brits. The Brits are mixed in there too.
And Louisiana is one of the most complicated states when it comes to race relations in the United States.
Yes,
it really is. This is not as simple as black and white. This is a mixed people. This is people they had mixed people who owned slaves in Louisiana. This is the truth. They had black people that owned slaves in Louisiana. This is a very complicated society. A lot of parts going into it, and it's been that way for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I challenge
that's why we call everybody. That's why we call everybody cuz, because they probably are. So, well, according to my biology teacher, it doesn't matter after second cousin. So,
Oh Lord, we're getting into the weeds here. Yeah, I challenge everyone to really look in the mirror, because the culture that we are so prideful of, which I am as well, all stems from settlement. Okay, so take a look at yourself, take a look at your family, take a look at everybody around you, and just really think about where all of this came from and why things are the way that they are today, and why the things are the way that they are in our heritage, our food, our culture, our behavior, all of those things. It's a melting pot. We all, we all here together from somewhere.
Oh,
right.
That's them from something.
It's true.
Yep.
So jumping into the cuisine part of this, it's what we really want to jump into and get controversial about. So in this book, they have the exact definition. Like literally it says, what's the difference between Cajun and Creole? And it lists it. So this is what Chef John Folse and the other writers, the other authors of this book said. Generally, Cajun cooking is heart, rustic, country fare, created as a family project. Cajun cooking is a home-style cuisine served over or with cooked white rice. Most often, it is found simmering in a cast iron pot with its main ingredients harvested from the abundance of the land, swamps, bayous, and streams. In comparison, Creole cuisine is a more sophisticated cousin. Creole is the cuisine of cooks and chefs and is based on European techniques. Wine or liquor-based sauces often enhance the subtle, delicate flavors. Though Creole cuisine has French roots as well, it has been greatly influenced by other cultures, including Native American, Spain, Germany, England, Africa, and Italy. In general, Creole cooking is a more sophisticated fare. And I can agree with all of that, because
Right.
Yeah.
Creole cooking is more sophisticated.
But what about
I
Creoles? What about Creoles that grew up in the country? Because Creoles that grow up without access to these things, why they're not cooking like city folk are cooking? I mean, yeah,
right,
everybody thinks Creoles. They think New Orleans. They think city folk. Well, there's a lot of Creoles that live all over Louisiana, and they don't cook like that. They don't
right,
have fancy sauces and things like that. You find their food is more rustic than you would expect by city cuisine. But because a Creole makes, is it a Creole cuisine or is it Cajun cuisine or is it sometimes? So there's a regional and access thing about this. So Louisiana food is pretty regional. Different parts
hmm
of the state cook different things, and also
hmm
people that have to access to the same things tend to cook the same way.
oh,
And
absolutely,
no Creole, because no Creole family is cooking hoity-toity fancy food if they're living in the swamp.
no, no, but there has to be a a fine line between what we're talking about here. If we're talking about Cajun and Creole as kind of like a culture, or we're talking about a style of cuisine here.
It's more of a style difference than it would be actually like a racial difference. There is none of. I don't think there's a very significant one. People from Southwest Louisiana, where we're from, South Central Southwestern Louisiana, they generally cook the same thing the same way, and there's not much of a difference that I've seen in Creole or Cajun food. And then you have a lot of migration of Creole dishes into Cajun cuisine. Red beans and rice is not a Cajun dish. That is a Creole dish. That is definitely from the New Orleans area. Whereas in Cajun country, we do more white beans. White beans and red beans was more
hmm
common. In
hmm
my family, we did more white beans than we did red beans. But we
Yeah.
did red beans too. But red beans are a thing that just drifted over. You have to think about how things have changed, how access to food has changed, how canning food changed access to food, how refrigeration changed access to food, how flash freezing changed access to food, and how the interstate system tied the state together for people to move easily from one area to the next, and how that changed. So things naturally migrate from one area to other. People from New Orleans moved to Lafayette. People from Lafayette moved to New Orleans. Chef Paul Prudhomme was a Cajun. He's a Cajun chef and opened a Cajun restaurant in New Orleans, which is known for Creole food. So, I mean, there's been some migration. There's been some back and forth. These things are not static. This is not a static situation with food. Food evolves as people learn different things from different places. They're going to adapt different things and cook different things and, adapt it to their taste. Like I think crawfish is a much bigger thing in South Central Louisiana, Southwestern Louisiana, than it was in New Orleans for a long time. But crawfish eventually became more popular in the New Orleans area too.
I mean, think about that too, though. I mean, obviously down here, you can go a little bit further down south in those rural areas, and what do you see? Crawfish ponds. I mean,
Right,
Oh
right.
yeah.
if you had the correct boat, you could damn near go get it yourself. You
Pretty
can't do
much.
that. You can't do that in New
Yeah.
Orleans, but you have access to it because of distribution, because of modern day,
Right.
food
Right.
transportation. So like what we're prideful about and what we deem as being one type of cuisine changes over time. Just like you said, Brandon D, we talked about this off camera too. It's just your access to things are just so much more vast. It's just so much more
Yeah.
widespread. I can go online and order something that I need to make whatever type of cuisine I want to. So
Yeah.
it's not. I'm not restricted by my area anymore.
No.
Nowadays we get ingredients from all over the place. Thailand, Japan,
Yeah.
Europe. We have access to so much. In India, we get ingredients from there too. We have access to so many different things, and we even have modern additions to Louisiana culture. Say like the Vietnamese after the Vietnamese War. War in Vietnam, we had a bunch of Vietnamese people move to Louisiana, and they've definitely added to the
Oh yeah.
overall conglomeration of food in Louisiana. You don't take over; you just become part of the story. So the story
Yeah.
is just additive. You're just adding more things to it. We learn different things from them. They cook different things than us. They learned how to shrimp in our waters. They learned how to live off the land and become successful. And like anybody else in the state, they add to what our culture is.
Right. Their modern day Cajun Creoles. Like that's how
Right.
it started off here. That's the whole story of being, the Acadians being driven out of Nova Scotia and being dumped into this land and
Right.
not
Right.
knowing how to work it and just working that land and learning how to survive on it and learning how to adapt to everything. So yeah, I say they fit right in. Come on.
Right. Well, it's not it's not a static situation. Like
No.
you cannot talk about modern Louisiana cuisine, which most of us are familiar with, without talking about Vietnamese food and the influence of Vietnamese culture on modern Louisiana cuisine. It has 100% had an effect. It's changed the way things have done. It's just changed things. It's added to it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. I agree.
The original always has to exist. There's always room for the traditional. When you talk about traditional things, it's always great to have it. But that doesn't mean you can't add to it either. You can't put a new twist on it. It's like, cracklins. Cracklins were originally pork. Now they have chicken cracklins. So that's just something new, Because before, nobody was going to kill a bunch of chickens and skin chickens to make cracklins. But
No.
modern production methods and modern things have changed the way we have access to food. You could go buy think about how ridiculous this is. You can go buy a pack of just chicken thighs. Just chicken thighs.
Yeah.
That doesn't really exist in other parts of the world. When you go buy a chicken, you get 2 thighs, 2 breasts, 2 legs, 2 wings, that type of thing. So nowadays it's different how things are processed and how we, how the American meat processors produce meat. They segregate it and, I guess it's a bad word, but like they separate it and put things in different things. So you can buy just a bunch of chicken thighs if you want. You don't have to buy a whole chicken.
Yeah.
Right. You can buy a cup full of chicken hearts.
Right, exactly. There's only one per chicken, so
a lot of death in that little container.
Right, a lot of chickens die for that container. But I mean, it's just food has changed so much. Like refrigeration and canning are for refrigeration, canning, drying, flash freezing, all these modern methods of producing and preserving food has really changed the way people eat. Now you're not limited to tomatoes only when you get tomatoes produced. You can get tomatoes year round. You can get okra year round. Think about that. Okra only comes out in the summer. Usually late summer is okra. Late summer, early fall, you get okra. I can go to the store and buy a bag of frozen okra, and it's pretty much the same as me getting. It's not quite as good. It's not as good as fresh okra, I'll admit, but it's pretty good. It's good for making gumbo.
Right. Always buying seasonal produce is always the best thing to do.
Exactly.
But if you're in a pinch, you can always go to that freezer section.
Yeah. No, so our access to food is so much different than people that came before us, even our parents, but we have access to food from all over the world. We have access to information from techniques all over the world. We've had people move to this country and start different types of restaurants, and we've learned how to, eat different types of food and cook different types of food.
I agree.
No, I mean, if you think about it, it's everybody just adds to it. It's evolving. Anything that's not changing dies. So the cuisine of Louisiana cannot become stagnant. We can't stagnate. We have to adapt, but we also have to stay rooted in our traditions, but we also have to adapt to the changing world around us and then learn how to do different things. I mean, crawfish étouffée is always going to be crawfish étouffée, but I don't know, man. Maybe if you have some langostinos, you make it out of langostino étouffée. Different ingredient, different type of seafood, same principle.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not
exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, as long as you're just like you said, it's just as long as you are staying true to the traditions, and if you continue to add to a dish, great. If it's good, if it tastes good, it is good, right, B? So like,
correct. That's always the truth.
Maybe you don't obviously we won't call it the traditional name of the dish.
Yeah, right.
You have created something else that's beautiful and bright and delicious, and that's fine.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. People have this stigmatism of, if I change this traditional recipe, I've just angered the gods. Do whatever you feel like you know how to do in the kitchen, and if it comes out good, great. You have created something great, and there's nothing wrong with that. So this whole line in the sand needs to go by the wayside.
Yes, yes.
I don't know, but I still don't think ravioli belong in gumbo.
Hell
Say what you
no.
want.
No.
I ain't talking about that shit.
There's certain things that they you see that culinarily that doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't. It's
No.
It's a what do they call it?
Clear.
Yeah. There's no ravioli in gumbo. There's no ravioli in gumbo.
Yeah, key phrase of what I said earlier: do what you know how to do in the kitchen. Don't just
Right.
Anyway, let's make sure I put that little.
Yeah, but things have to change. Things have to evolve. It has to be experimented. It has to grow. But that doesn't mean that the traditions are now void because there's something new. I mean, one thing we really have access to is we have access to higher quality ingredients.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know, we have access to different ingredients. I don't know about you, but like, man, stuff like canola oil, man, I don't even buy canola oil anymore. What a waste of money. Like, get some avocado oil. Way better than that. We only have 3 types of oil in our house. We have avocado oil, olive oil, and sesame oil. That's pretty much it. And then I have
pretty much.
We have
peanut
coconut
oil
too.
Coconut, peanut oil. I use peanut oil for fry.
But that's all high quality oils. That's all high quality oils. We did, exactly.
And I have beef tallow in the Wagyu beef tallow in the refrigerator.
Yeah,
too.
definitely got beef tallow. I even have some. Yeah, so.
But think about that, like
it's all high quality.
Yeah, right. But think about access to like these tallows and stuff. That's not something that's even 20 years old.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
we didn't have beef tallow. I mean, they had lard. I mean, but that's about it. But we didn't have access to beef tallow I've seen everything: beef tallow, chicken fat, duck fat. And you think about this: duck fat is really super common in France, and it's not common in the U.S. But Amazon makes it available to everybody. So I have ordered a can of duck fat straight off of Amazon, and it worked awesome for what I used.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you didn't see those things unless you were a farmer. Or
right.
You lived on a farm, or you had access to those kind of things because you had those kind of animals.
Right. So, and I mean, duck is way more popular in France than it is in the United States.
Yeah.
There's things that you just don't see. Like in Europe, lamb and duck are really common, and in America, people don't like lamb or duck as much. So, but I do.
Yep.
What are we're going to jump into some of the cuisine. What are some of we just touched on some of the proteins that are, kind of uncommon, but what are some of the common proteins that would be distinguished between Cajun and Creole cuisine?
I found that Creole dishes tend to use more crab than Cajun dishes. Crab is
seafood?
Not just seafood. Crab in particular. Crab is more common in I think Creole dishes than and it could be because of the crabs are really difficult to transport without refrigeration. So unless you're in an area that has crabs, crab you wouldn't see many crab dishes coming out of Opelousas, Louisiana. You would see that more in Terrebonne Parish, like the southern parishes, close to Abbeville, Kaplan, those areas you would see the
close
South
to
Louisiana,
the water.
Close to the water, right? I mean, my grandmother comes from pretty much, my dad's mom comes from pretty much the water, and she cooked a lot of crab dishes. So, and that my family is Creole, not Cajun, so they cooked a lot of crab and shrimp because that's what they had access to.
Yeah, proximity.
Not as much crawfish. My grandmother never cooked crawfish. My mom cooked crawfish, but I can't remember my grandmother cooking like a crawfish etouffee. It would always be shrimp.
Proximity and access drives direction.
Exactly.
So
exactly
where you are is what you have access to is going to drive what you do. That's just you're going to make. If you live by the water, you are going to make more seafood dishes throughout the week than you will meat dishes because you have access to that. It's going to be cheaper for you. It's just the way that it is, right? So
you're at the source.
Yeah, so that's where that whole concept of being Creole versus Cajun, having Creoles cook seafood dishes, or having Cajuns cook maybe other things if they live in a different area than than by the water or whatever the case may be.
I'm just thinking the one thing about it is seasoning. we can talk about seasoning. Like, there's not much of a difference between Cajun and Creole seasoning. It's basically the same. Sometimes you'll get, like in New Orleans, a little bit more of that Italian influence with the like the basil, maybe a little more basil than you would expect. Cajun and Creole seasoning, I think it's pretty similar. Hey, Tonery Satchery says Creole seasoning, not Cajun seasoning, and it's used by a lot of Cajuns. So just pointing that out.
Yeah, the seasoning, I don't see a lot of difference in seasoning at whatsoever.
Not at all.
That
varies more from person to person than it does cuisine to cuisine.
Right,
yeah,
I
so
agree.
I think your proteins are really going to be. I mean, your proteins are pretty much going to be fairly the same. What you do with them may vary a little bit, but
right.
You know,
Yeah, because my family, I mean, my dad's family, we had everything. Like they were in, the swamp. They were crawfishing. They were fishing. They were going to the salt water. They were crabbing. They were shrimping. They were catching saltwater fish. We had all of that growing up, because that was the cheapest way to feed your family, was to go out and do that. They hunted, deer, squirrel, all those things. So yeah, I always identified as Cajun because I didn't know anything differently, So all of those things, we incorporated that into, our food, all those proteins. So I grew up in, St. Landry Parish, so we weren't close to any kind of water source, at least not salt water. So, but that was just part of my family's, that's just what we did. We lived off the land.
Right. And I think in Cajun cooking, you're definitely going to find more game. Definitely more game. And that's like saying separating Cajun and Creole. The Creoles that lived in the rural parts ate just as much game as the people that lived in Cajuns that lived in the rural parts. So that's, it depends what you have access to. If you're in a city, you're not going to have access to hunting, really talking about.
Right. So it's going to be less. No. You're not going to eat a whole lot of venison. You're not going to eat a whole lot of, you're probably not going duck hunting. Right. Not doing those things. You're living close to the city. So unless you come to the rural area, unless you come to the country, then you're probably not having access to those things. And then we kind of have to talk a little bit about, or not really talk about it, but at least mention the differences between now, which we did earlier, but just to clarify, the differences between now, because we have access to more now than, before. Right. So you can travel now. You can go an hour, 2 hours down the road and, go on a hunting trip for the weekend and then bag your deer. And now you have deer meat if you live in the city. Right.
Interstate system, man, made travel easier and safer.
Yeah. Back in the day, they weren't doing that.
Right. And not just that, but you can put in an order with a company to say you want an alligator. I need an alligator for this date. They can get that for you. Whereas before, it's not, that's a modern concept,
I mean, a couple of months ago, I called someone on the phone and placed an order for the second best brisket you can get in the world. I mean, how do you, that's different. It's a much different time now.
Yeah, and think about this, the difference is the proliferation of the automobile. That's huge. I mean, you're talking post-World War II, the car became much more common. I mean, that's the dream of the American, have a car and be able to travel where you want. And that's pretty much true. I mean, in the South, most people have vehicles, so they can travel when they need to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just think, in the past maybe 15 years, how advanced our society has become technology-wise, like things that we didn't have access to or didn't even know that the things existed that we have access to now, it's just unbelievable.
Kobe beef, for example, nobody would have heard about that in the 1960s, 70s. A few people knew about it, but no one else knew about it.
Right.
That comes through television, the internet. People are doing things. I mean, think of how YouTube and streaming media has changed everything. You're able to see things and really determine what you want to see. And, if you want to go on a deep dive in cooking on any social media or any internet on the platform on the internet, you can really get deep into the stuff that no one had access to before.
Right.
Nobody didn't even know about any of these things.
Exactly.
I want to touch on something real quick before we move on to something else, because we're talking about Cajun versus Creole right here, and we're talking about traditional values and traditional cuisine. How deep are we going with this? Because if you change one thing in a dish, and we talked about it a little earlier, but I'm just, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, it just doesn't make sense. If you change one thing in a dish, does that completely negate the fact that this is a quote unquote Cajun dish?
I don't think it does.
Case in point. Let's say I get beef cheeks, right? I get me some beef cheeks. I take those beef cheeks. I love beef cheeks. I take those beef cheeks, I clean them up, and then I smother them and make some gravy out of them and put it over rice. That's not traditional.
I'd say,
who the hell was eating beef cheek gravy back in 1750? Okay?
Exactly.
But no one would tell me anything about it. No one would say a damn thing about it. But let you change something else that they deem as being a super traditional Cajun dish, and you change one ingredient and you make it better. You put poblano peppers in your gumbo versus bell pepper. Now we got a problem. What the hell are we talking about here, people? What's going on?
Well, you know what I say about the beef cheek things? It's not traditional, but it makes sense because beef cheeks have a lot of connective tissue. And a beef cheek will make a better gravy than pretty much probably any cut of beef on the cow.
I didn't had it. Yeah,
there's
that
nothing
shit good.
There's nothing more with more connective tissue than a beef cheek. It is. No. Like I say, it makes the most amount of gelatin. It will give you the best. It'll probably make the best gravy. It's got the deepest flavor of any cut of beef. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the beef cheek gravy. But like a poblano pepper, we're talking about. A pepper is just a pepper. Yeah. Whether you use a green pepper, a poblano pepper, or a red pepper, or a yellow pepper, or orange pepper, these all do the same things. But the green pepper just has the least amount of flavor of any pepper.
Right.
Because it's basically an unripened pepper. So it's got the most bitterness. It's got the least amount of flavor. Yeah. The poblano has more flavor. I use poblanos pretty much exclusively in the place of green bell pepper.
Yep. And don't let you slice up a bell pepper and get a lot of that flesh, that white flesh on the inside. It's more bitter than it's designed to be. But that was my point. That was my point with the beef cheeks, is that, back in the day, let's say you have Cajun heritage, right? You're a Cajun person. Nobody has access to beef cheeks back then. You're not getting 6, 8, 10 beef cheeks. You're not slaughtering 10 cows to take some beef cheeks to make some gravy.
Not at all. Modern concept, man. You're talking about modern production methods and how, like what we've talked about before, all of us has talked about, is the economics of food are really important. So how a beef is slaughtered and how the meat is cut, and what is turned into ground, and what is turned into steak, and what is turned into roast, and what is turned into stew meat. All of these are the economics of how the cow has to be sold, and all this changes, depending on where you live. So the beef cheeks are like, pretty much from my understanding, like beef cheeks were more like a Mexican thing. Mexicans knew how to cook beef cheeks. Like you go get barbacoa tacos. Like, what is this? The first time I had that as barbacoa, what's that? They said, oh, it's beef. And I tried that. I was like, this is really good. I'm a big fan of beef, so I like the extra beefy flavor. I was like, what is this? This is good. Looked it up what it was. I was like, actually, I asked one of my coworkers, what is barbacoa, man? I had some of it, and I loved it, man. I thought it was great. And he's like, well, it's basically a cow's head that we then, stew in a pot for hours, and then we take everything, chop it up, and make tacos out of it, or, whatever. And I was like, wow, that's really good. It didn't really bother me. It's like, that's cool. But then, you find out they sell beef cheeks in individual packs. You only get 2 per cow. So, It's not. It's you don't get much of it off of a cow. So
Right.
yeah, and this is just a different thing, a different cut of beef, a different thing you have to learn. But there's economic side to how you process beef and what you cut and what you sell. Like
there's only one tongue on a cow.
Yeah, right. There's only two briskets per cow, but the briskets sell for a brisket can sell for $3 a pound, and off the same cow, the steak may sell for $15 a pound. So how we cut up the steak, how we cut up the cow and process it depends a lot on the economics of the beef industry.
Right. So I want us to jump into something. Let's talk about jambalaya and the differences. That's something we haven't talked much about this season.
I will say with jambalaya. Jambalaya is a Creole dish, right? It's a Creole dish. Its parent dish is Spanish paella. That's the parent dish of jambalaya. It's a Creole dish. Cajun people make jambalaya too, but it's different. It's a different style. It's a different style of jambalaya. Both are good. I've had great versions of both. I've had terrible versions of both. Oh. So guess what? You're going to have to judge these things individually where you get it and realize just because it says it's Cajun doesn't mean it's good. Just because it says it's Creole also doesn't mean it's good.
No.
So it has to be individual. There are great versions of both and terrible versions of both. And you will have to find them out for yourself.
Right.
Oh, man. So
all right, barbecue brand.
Yeah. I've been holding this in for so long.
Oh
man.
Good.
I got
let it out, man.
I got a full clip. And I'm so loaded right now. I am so sick and tired of people cooking jambalaya and it tastes like salt rice. It tastes like they took rice and they added a little bit of chicken stock and cooked it in a rice pot and added a little bit of extra salt in it. There's places that make this type of jambalaya, like Jambalaya Shop, I believe it's called. That place didn't last here in Lafayette. But you will go to jambalaya contests and people are cooking this type of jambalaya and winning. And I just don't understand it. This is not jambalaya, people. This is not how you're supposed to do this. Whether you're talking about, I don't care if you're talking about Cajun, Creole, I don't care what heritage you're from. This is not jambalaya, what I'm seeing out here. It doesn't even have any color to it. It just looked like...
like some brown rice? Some dirty rice?
Yeah.
Lord, let's not even go there.
Not even...
That dirty rice is another Cajun... That's part of the tomato wars, too.
Lord,
dirty rice versus rice dressing. Good God. That's going to be talked about, too, in upcoming episodes.
Let's talk about... Let's go through the steps of jambalaya. Let's just let people know. What are the... just basic steps of making a good jambalaya? What's your first step?
Onions.
Well,
onions.
Yeah, I start. Yeah, you definitely need some onions in there. If
it's a Cajun jambalaya, it's onion. It's a lot of onion in it. And it's onions that are cooked down very, very far. But basically, it's like a Cajun jambalaya is basically like you're braising meat with sausage and making a gravy with it, and then you're gonna cook rice in that and make a jambalaya.
Yeah.
Bingo.
A Creole one is roughly the same, except you're gonna have from the Spanish influence, they have tomatoes in it.
Oh, not tomatoes.
Oh God, tomatoes. Oh,
tomatoes.
Not the tomatoes.
Watch out.
Tomatoes. Oh my God! Please, people in Louisiana, don't kill me. I mentioned tomatoes in Louisiana food. Look, a Creole jambalaya has tomatoes. It can be crushed tomatoes, diced tomatoes, tomato sauce, tomato paste. It has tomatoes in it. It's from the Spanish influence because Spanish paella has tomatoes in it.
Yes,
and basically you're doing this
delicious.
Yeah, and you're doing the same thing. You're making a sauce, a gravy, and you're cooking rice in it. That's pretty much what jambalaya is.
So. If you guys, if there are any of our subscribers, any of our viewers that are going to New Orleans at any time in the future, do yourself a favor and go to Lola's Cafe.
That's great paella.
It's Spanish. It's all Spanish food, but the best paella I've ever had in my life. If you
Awesome.
never experienced paella, this is going to set the bar real, real high for anything else that you try. You're going to wait 35, 40 minutes for this. It is worth every minute you wait for this. I'm telling you, you have to do it. So this is the parent dish to jambalaya, whether it's Creole or it's Cajun. This is where it comes from. Okay.
Exactly.
And a Creole jambalaya also mixes meat and seafood. Typically, you'll have like shrimp and sausage and chicken or pork or all. Paella is not a jambalaya or paella is not a dish that is. This is kind of like you throw a bunch of stuff in there, what you have. You have fish. Paella could have fish. It could have mussels. It could have clams. It could have shrimp. It'll have chorizo. It'll have chicken. It'll have pork. Whatever. It's all up to the individual cook. So it's up to the cook what the cook wants to put into it. So whatever expresses your jambalaya personality the best, whether you like sausage and shrimp or pork sausage and shrimp or chicken sausage and shrimp or pork, chicken, sausage, and shrimp, and whatever. You're free to use all of it.
And you know why?
It's not.
You know why? Because
Why'd that be?
It works.
Yeah.
Right.
It works. It all goes together. It works. It works so well in a jambalaya. It works really well in paella. And paella just has that more Spanish, they have a little sofrito.
That saffron,
you got that saffron in there. You use poquito.
Razzle-dazzle.
Yeah, a little razzle dazzle. A little poquillo peppers go in there. You use the sweet paprika goes in there. So it's a lot of different flavors happening, and it's just so good. It's just so good. And yes,
I will give
jambalaya is a derivative of that.
Yes. I'm not a jambalaya cook. I can make a decent jambalaya. I'm not great at it. I'll give you one tip. Never drain the fat off of your jambalaya before you put your rice in.
No, that's
criminal mistake. Criminal mistake. That is so key to making jambalaya. You can never drain the fat. I don't care if it looks like there's a lot of grease in it. Live with it.
I think, but that's what it's. I think people
that's
are
what
doing
coats the
that.
rice, man.
Yeah,
don't do that. Don't ever do that.
I taste some of these jambalayas and they taste dry.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm not
never
saying
that.
Never. I'm not saying that your jambalaya has to be super wet like a rice dressing or anything, but it needs to be. You need to keep all of that moisture in there. You brown your meat. Yeah, you brown your meat in there. You throw your onions in there. You cook that. You add your liquid. When you put your liquid in there, that's when you can put the rest of your seasonings in, because whether you're talking about a Creole jambalaya, you're talking about a Cajun jambalaya, all of these things co-intermingle. Like, we are just crossing lines on all of our cuisine at this point. So like that's what we're trying to get at this episode. So jambalaya, just like a lot of our other dishes, our staple dishes down here in Louisiana, are heavily seasoned. So you heavily season your dish because you have rice going in, right? Because rice is going to kind of mute those flavors. Heavily season that broth, bring it up to a kind of like a high simmer. Throw your rice in there, give it a quick little stir. Cover that pot, let it simmer. You cook all of that together. You don't drain anything. Yes. Everything that you put in the pot stays in there.
Right. Because that rice is going to absorb all of that flavor, all of that fat. That's all going to flavor, going to get to the core of those little rice granules.
Look.
Yeah, you can tell the difference between if somebody cooks their rice in the rice cooker and then adds it, because it's not going to be the same. Like you said, something's off. It has to cook all together. That rice has to absorb that liquid.
Yep.
Right. And that's what jambalaya. I say, people who put rules around jambalaya, man, like just stop, because it's such an open-ended dish. It really is. It's kind of like what you have on hand. If you want to make it with chicken, make it with chicken. If you want to make it with pork, make it with pork. If you want to use pork and sausage, do that. You want to use chicken and sausage, do that. It's such an open-ended dish. You really don't need to box in. But if you use chicken, don't make your jambalaya with chicken breast, because you will not like the results. That it was a way too long of a cook process. You need like a chicken thigh to go into chicken thoughts to go into jambalaya, because it's a making that gravy and getting all that collagen and all that goodness out of the chicken is a slow process. So
Yeah.
chicken breasts are not going to stand up to that kind of cooking process.
No, they don't have the fat that's needed to be rendered for that
Or
rice
the
to
connective
absorb.
tissue, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Plus, hashtag thighs are so much better anyway.
Oh yeah.
Hashtag thighs.
Yeah, thighs are better. Sorry, I had to adjust mine. Thighs are better than chicken breasts. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
But jambalaya, that's why I don't really like to box in jambalaya, because jambalaya, you make jambalaya how you want, and if you want to use tomatoes. God forbid. If you don't want to use tomatoes, don't use tomatoes. Yeah. I think it's so ridiculous. This tomato shit is just drives me absolutely fucking bananas, man.
I just don't understand why it's such a controversial ingredient.
This is how
I just don't get it.
I don't get it.
I will explain how it started. Look, first off, this guy's like, Creoles use more tomatoes than Cajuns. Then next thing was, Cajuns use tomatoes very little. Creoles use it in everything. And then then it's like, Cajuns never use tomatoes, and Creoles use tomatoes in everything. Everything Creole has tomatoes in it. And then now it's like, a Cajun won't even look at a tomato. If they look at a tomato, they go fucking nuts and lose their mind. And Creoles love tomatoes. They just use tomatoes in everything. Breakfast, dessert, doesn't matter. Tomatoes, everything Creole. That's how stupid it's gotten.
I don't understand.
Creole dishes use tomatoes when they use tomatoes, and when they don't use tomatoes, they don't have them. This is true because of access. And if you look at it, like Creole gumbo, I know a lot of Creoles that make gumbo. My family's Creole make gumbo. Never ever was there a single tomato put in a roux gumbo. Casey's family is Cajun. When they make okra gumbo, there's tomatoes in the okra to cook it down.
Right, it's a separate process.
Get over it, please, because I'm over this shit. I'm tired of it. It's such a contrived and trite like, just stop, man.
It doesn't make any sense.
Want.
Poor little tomato. He ain't done nothing to nobody.
What did tomato ever did to you? I'm sorry, man. Look, tomatoes are delicious, and look, they work where they work, and when they don't make sense, don't use them. A roux gumbo, a tomato makes no sense in a roux gumbo at all.
No, it would get lost.
Nobody an okra gumbo, a tomato,
Nobody knows how to cook, puts tomatoes in roux gumbo. Nobody does that.
No.
Why?
Who do you know is doing this?
And
I have not seen one thing on Facebook and all these little crazy groups. I have not seen, of all the crazy gumbos that I have seen online, except that one. But that was a Texas gumbo. But anyway, I don't even know if that had roux in it. So we shouldn't even count that. I've never seen a roux gumbo with tomatoes in it. I've never seen it. It just doesn't make sense. That sounds nasty to me, actually. Like, why would you have your tomatoes with some thick roux?
No, it's a conflict of it's not going to work. Yeah. I mean, there's dishes that you use tomato and roux in, like a coubillon. You use tomatoes and roux, but it's in proportion to what the dish is. You know, like a gumbo that's made and then you throw a can of tomatoes in there. I'm like, why? This is not going to add anything.
It's not doing anything. You're just trying to add stuff from your cabinet, from your pantry into like that one gumbo with all the cabinet, with all the things from the cabinet, all the things. What's going bad in the fridge? We gonna put that in the gumbo so we don't waste.
Right, and there's also we also have to establish a difference between tomatoes and tomato paste. Tomato paste is a wildly different ingredient than tomatoes. You could use tomato paste in things that you wouldn't expect. For example, if you put tomato paste in a gravy, this actually does work. I mean, if you make beef bourguignon, that's a French dish. It has a little bit of tomato paste in there. Tomato paste is a very different ingredient because it is made from the whole tomato, skin included, dried in the sun. So, and then ground up into a paste. It is a very different ingredient than a tomato. I put tomato paste in a lot of dishes that people don't expect. when I make gravy, like I make that mushroom gravy I do for Oktoberfest. There's a little bit of tomato paste in there because that helps brown. It adds some naturally occurring as MSG, and it adds a little bit of sugar, so it helps things caramelize. So it gives a lot of flavor. Now, it does not necessarily give a tomato flavor. If you put it in at the right moment, I put tomato paste in when I'm sauteing my vegetables. So I'll add tomato paste at that time, and I'll put a cook on that tomato paste. And once you brown that tomato paste, it's going to basically intermingle with the flavors that you add in next. And it's just going to become a very background note. But it won't be it won't be a really strong tomato flavor. It will be a very strong savory flavor. It's a savoring agent.
Right.
That's what tomato paste is. So if you put tomato paste in your etouffee, it's okay.
I literally used tomato paste tonight to cook dinner. I made a little pasta dish, and I threw some tomato paste in there, cooked it down in my, I made almost like a little butter roux, and kind of cooked that tomato paste down with some garlic, and just threw my cream in there and made a cream sauce basically. But it was a deeper. It wasn't super tomato forward. It was just a deeper level of savory flavor that kind of gave that.
It's a savoring agent.
Yeah. So and I don't get, just like you were saying, B. I don't understand this whole situation of picking on tomatoes, because there are so many damn Cajun dishes that have tomatoes as a part of the ingredients.
Yeah.
A lot.
I I'll tell you another ingredient that there is a big difference in the use of in Creole and Cajun cuisine, and that's cream. Cream is much more prevalent in Creole cuisine than Cajun cuisine. If you talk about cream, that's a different that ingredient is more prevalent because you get a lot of cream dishes because of the French cooking influence and all those fancy restaurant type dishes that use a lot of cream.
Right.
Because cream is awesome.
We all know I'm a little bougie, so I tend to cook a little bit more, towards the French style of cooking. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a little cream.
And some of those sauces, like we discussed earlier, they're liquor-based sauces. You have wine-based sauces.
Butter-based sauces, right.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Those are, definitely more in Creole dishes versus Cajun dishes.
Correct.
When I think of a Cajun dish, I think of something way rustic, something like really earthy, very savory. Yeah, and when it comes to the difference in jambalaya, in my mind, a Creole jambalaya is going to be more seafood based, whereas a Cajun jambalaya is going to be like pork or chicken, mainly pork, and that's how I view it, But
a lot of onions in both, but Cajun jambalaya has that really deep caramelized onion flavor, which I think that's really what makes it magic, is the Cajun jambalaya. If you're not doing that, you're not making Cajun jambalaya. It's got to have that real deep, because basically you're taking your meat and you're braising it, and you're making that braising liquid and sauce, and then you're adding rice to that, and then adding liquid to make your rice cook. Yeah. And really it's a stretch dish. It's made to take a little bit of meat, and a little bit of sausage, a little bit of this, and basically put it with some rice and stretch it and make something that's basically really filling and everybody's happy with. And that's the definition, like Cajun food.
But that can go across the board too. That can go for Creole too, because that rice is going to stretch your ingredients. You want that flavor infused into your rice so that you can feed more people with this dish. That you have that flavor that will stretch. So I think that concept goes across both boards here.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about jambalaya is poverty food. I mean, across the board.
Absolutely.
I mean,
any rice dish is going to be a poverty dish.
Right. And I mean, it's really about stretching as much as you can, and, Creole. And the thing about it is you can't just limit Creole cuisine to what you see in restaurants and people cooking. Is it Creole cuisine because it's made by Creoles, or is it, what is it? I mean, what defines it? It's really such a hard definition. If you're talking about fancy Louisiana food, I mean, usually it's Creole, but hey, there's some fancy Cajun dishes too. They could, it just depends who's preparing and what their style is. If you want to make like a like Brandon Barbecue Brand said, if you want to make like a beef cheek gravy and make it and serve it over risotto, is that still Cajun? I would say it is.
I would say it
like
is.
something Brandon cooked last week.
Yeah, it's just like
exactly.
Well,
like
let's think about this. Yeah, look. Risotto is not a dish. It's a style of cooking rice, and all you're doing is cooking rice in a different way. And and if you're taking like a beef cheek, you can make a richer gravy with a beef cheek than you can with a chuck roast. That's just a fact.
Yeah,
so it's going to be a different flavor. But the spirit is the same. It's the same. The spirit of the cook is the same. I'm taking something that's tough and, it takes a long time to cook. I'm making it into a super rich thing that's going to be super savory, satisfy everybody. That's your goal. I mean, I think Cajun food, I think a lot of a lot of pork dishes, a lot of braised dishes, a lot of, really, really deep flavors, taking what you have and doing the most. I mean, that's what I think Cajun food is. You take simple ingredients and they're cooking it in a way that really maximizes the potential of what the food they have. That's what Cajun food is. It's you take some onions, some celery, some bell pepper, garlic, pork, and you cook it to where and seasoning, and you just cook it to where you get every inch of flavor out of the food, and that's a Cajun dish right there.
Right.
Creole is a little bit more classically trained, that classical, European style cooking, the fancy sauces and, the different cooking techniques, restaurant inspired stuff. But you have to realize, like, the poor Creoles cooked the same way that the poor Cajuns did. They didn't have cream sauces or butter sauces. They're cooking the same inspired things that they cook. They're cooking jambalaya. Maybe they have access to tomatoes, maybe because of proximity, maybe because they grow them, but not all Creole food is necessarily cooked with tomatoes. The poor Creoles did not cook like they cooked in a fancy restaurant in New Orleans.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to find somebody a Creole living in South Louisiana cooking like they're cooking out of Galatoire's or something like that. That's not happening.
Think about how dumb this sounds. You got a garden outside. It's time to harvest some tomatoes. You got some tomatoes sitting on your counter. You go to make a jambalaya. Them tomatoes are about to go bad. You're not gonna put them tomatoes in that jambalaya because tomatoes don't go in jambalaya. Come on,
no
stop
waste.
It, bro.
Right.
Stop it.
Right. And and I just had a really interesting thought. So what if this happened? And I can see this happening. So what if Cajuns were growing tomatoes, okay? But maybe that it was more economical for them to sell those tomatoes in the city.
That could be the case. Or tomatoes may be difficult to grow. If, let's say, Louisiana was in a different climate and tomatoes actually grew well, you think Cajuns wouldn't have used tomatoes and everything?
Right, exactly. It could have been
it's not about flavor palette or flavor choice. Right. It's about access. The access to tomatoes was greater to some communities than to others. Right. Just like the access to beef was greater in some people in Louisiana than others, or the access to crab, or the access to shrimp, or the access to crawfish. Whatever you had access to, you took it and made the most out of it.
Right.
And Creole cuisine is also not defined by just what they cook in New Orleans restaurants. It is defined by the people who are Creole, who cook Creole food in their houses. That is the true expression of it. And I know, a lot of people in New Orleans, they use butter roux in their gumbo instead of us. In Southwest Louisiana, we use oil-based roux.
Yeah.
Is one greater than the other? No, it's a different result, but it's in the same spirit. It's not right. It's not such a wildly different concept that, oh my God, you made roux with butter. Holy crap, that's so different than anything I've ever done. This is the same thing. It's just a little bit different of a take. You can't get a super dark roux with a butter roux. It's just not possible.
Right. Yeah.
Get off your high horse,
people.
Yeah. Look, man, if it tastes good, it is good. It doesn't matter if it's called a Creole dish or a Cajun dish. If it tastes good, it is good.
It doesn't matter.
Nothing more than that.
Leave them poor tomatoes alone. They didn't do nothing to nobody.
Give tomatoes a break, man. You need You need your lycopene. They have all kinds of antioxidants and stuff, and they're great for you.
Such a great ingredient. Such a great ingredient. You know.
And you know, they all people crapping on tomatoes, but they all make their Cajun spaghetti, and that doesn't have tomatoes.
Cajun spaghetti.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
Sauce
you
pecan,
like tomatoes,
coubillon, sausage and tomato gravy.
Right.
All that out here. Y'all stop it.
Oh man, yeah, exactly.
I want some of that right now.
So yeah. I just think the tomato thing is just ridiculous to say. Look, we all agree tomatoes have no place in a roux gumbo at all. Now they have a place in okra gumbo, but the way where we're from, how you cook okra is we stew okra down with tomatoes. We smother okra until it's broken apart, non-slimy. Tomatoes are a key ingredient to that because their acid helps break the slime down because slime is a protein. It's mucilage. And proteins are helped by breaking down by long cooking process in acidic environments. So that's why we use tomatoes to break the slime in okra. No one likes slimy okra gumbo. That is not a thing. Please stop with this myth. We stew okra down, and there's other ways to do okra where you can break the slime into two and kind of keep it whole. But how we like to do it, we stew that okra down, we smother it, we break it down, and then we cook it into gumbo, and it's fantastic. And the flavor combination between okra and tomato is fantastic.
Yeah,
it just pairs well. It's a perfect pairing.
Okay, so I just realized something. We didn't have a safety moment on this last episode of season 1.
Oh man,
safety moment.
Womp womp womp.
Safety moment. I'll tell you the safety. I got a safety moment of the day. If I decide to cook some beef cheek gravy and throw it over some risotto, stay the hell off of my my post feed.
Mind your business.
Safe for you there. Mind your business. Womp, womp, womp,
I'm gonna tell you if you cook that, I'm gonna be coming over. I'm like, what, man? Look, I'm about to take a little drive, man. But that's
how long till we get to Lafayette?
How long you gonna be cooking that? That's about a 2.5 hour cook, man. I'm gonna be there though. Hold it for an hour. I'll be there. But that's such a great idea for kind of a twist on a Cajun dish.
It is a great twist, actually. Yeah.
Hey, B, add some demi-glace to that too.
Hey.
Bang.
Hey.
But yeah. But I think that also goes back into like the new way of cooking food. You know, where we're taking ingredients, we're taking methods, we're doing things like making demi-glace and adding that to our gravies and stuff, and just to kind of intensify the flavors and make it more intense than it was before.
Yeah, the more you learn, just the more you can play around with things that this works. I know this works because this affects this ingredient this way, and then these things affect this way. And I haven't crossed any lines. I haven't crossed any guidelines. I haven't broken any like baseline rules here. I've just enhanced my dish, and that's fine to do.
That's exactly. Because think what you're doing with a demi-glace. You're roasting bones and onions and carrot and all this stuff. You're roasting it, deglazing it with water, getting all those brown bits, putting that in a pot of water and letting that simmer until you break down the gelatin in the dish. And that is basically a different way of making the same product as a gravy. It really is. And you could use that to make, hey, look, if you're not making enough gravy, throw a little bit of that demi-glace in there, man. You got it. Make your own. It's worth the effort.
Right. So with that being said, I want to go off and do our little end quote of the night. This comes to us from Paul Prudhomme. How fitting. He says, when the taste changes with every bite and the last bite tastes as good as the first, that's Cajun.
Yeah. I like that. I want to agree with that. Mm-hmm. People, leave the tomatoes alone. They really are your friends. I can't let it go because it's been beaten to death over and over and over, and everybody's just tired of it.
Yes.
Especially me.
Before we go, I have to challenge that quote on Chef Paul, because that last bite sometimes isn't just as good as the first bite, because if that food is good, I'm going back for that second plate.
You're right about that.
Law of diminishing returns on
Absolutely.
those plates, you know.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. So, you guys, it's been a great season 1. This has been fun. And by the way, we want to thank you guys. We've hit what's the count of our subscribers at this current moment?
Oh, hold on. Let me live check it.
Oh,
Live
yeah,
check.
We've been going up this week. It's been great.
Let's see. Yeah, it has been fantastic. 244 at the last count.
244 subscribers. You guys are the absolute best.
Absolutely.
Thank you everybody for listening and watching our videos. Please feel free to ask us questions, message us, about any questions you have. If you want a specific recipe, you can email us or message us and we'll give it to you.
Absolutely.
Like, subscribe, share, tell everybody about us.
Comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's absolutely. And we will be releasing as many shorts and as many videos as we can during our break between season 1 and season 2. So we'll probably pick up season 2 in the new year. So we're going to take off, for the holidays and stuff. So still tune in. We may jump in and surprise y'all every now and then. So, we appreciate everything.
Barbecue Brain may have a couple of surprise pop-ups for y'all. So,
we'll definitely be making some cooking shorts and cooking videos. So we're gonna plan to do some long format stuff too.
And there might be a collab soon for the holidays.
Maybe so.
So tune in. Stay tuned. So thank you guys. You have a nice night and keep stirring.